Mr. Michael McCann.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the motion, and maybe I could start with the obvious point, which has also been mentioned by my honourable friend from Streatham, in saying that however poorly some of our banks behaved, they are an essential part of our infrastructure, and they will be an essential driver for ensuring that our economy improves. The question, however, is whether we relied on them too much, which I think has to be given a resounding yes, because when the crash came, not only did we have to bail out some of those large banks that became too large to fail, but we also lost a huge percentage income of our revenue. And, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that a wry smile comes across my face when I hear, sometimes from the benches opposite, the crocodile tears for manufacturing industry, because I do remember the period when I was a young man from 1979 up until 1997, when a lot of the members on the benches opposite were responsible for that demise in manufacturing, a demise in manufacturing that ensured that my father, my late father, lost his job in heavy engineering and never get back into it. And whilst the RBS has become a byword for profligacy, other banks, such as Barclays, didn't request or need a bailout, and I think we have to recognise that fact. We have to recognise, Mr. Speaker, that we do live in difficult times. But today, we heard from the National Australia Bank, and perhaps I could make this point, and ministers can give me an answer later, because they announced a review of their Clydesdale banks and Yorkshire banks, who combined employ 8,500 people in our country. They have 2 UK networks, and they'll be re-evaluating their UK wing. Cameron Clyde, the National Australian Bank Chief Executive, said in his statement, "It is clear that the UK economy is likely to experience a much longer period of subdued growth, with the ongoing sovereign debt crisis in the Eurozone and the continuing austerity programme by the UK Government." Now, just as the members on the benches opposite take great glee, despite the fact that we are nearly 2 years into their government, about complaining about the mess, as they describe it, that was left behind, leaving aside, of course, the fact that the urgent action that we took in the UK led the world, the situation is that you should remember the statement, "What goes around comes around," because what the Chief Executive of the National Australian Bank is actually saying is that it is your economic policies that are contributing to the problems that they are facing, because you're concentrating on austerity measures and not the growth of the economy. And that's something that I hope you'll be able to answer, rather than, as the Minister did previously, is jump over that particular point. Now, whilst recognising that the banks make a significant contribution to our economy, what's been brought into sharp focus in the last 4 years is reward structure and behaviour. And on lending, banks, particularly from the experience of businesses in my constituency, have went from a Viv Nicholson spend policy in lending to a Steptoe and Son policy of penny pinching. And the businesses that I've been involved with in my constituency tell me that RBS want to charge them exorbitant rates of interest for safe business deals, copper-bottom business deals, that the RBS have put themselves first and not looked after the small and medium enterprises in our country, and most outrageously, and ministers should take note of this, RBS stands accused of deliberately putting in place conditions to put businesses out of businesses in order that they can then reclaim the business assets at the cheapest price possible. And that is outrageous for a bank, outrageous way of a bank doing business when the economy is in such difficulty, and we need to ensure that we keep people in employment in order that they can contribute to the wider good. Now, on remuneration, Mr. Speaker, it's even more bizarre. And I saw some chuntering on the benches opposite when colleagues were making some points earlier that these business people who paid large bonuses pay the taxes. Well, there's many, many millions more, our constituencies across the country, that also pay their taxes. And I bet they wish that they were getting some of the remuneration packages that have been given out in RBS, because as a former trade union official, I have negotiated more pay deals than I would care to remember. And in the civil service, in the early days of performance-related pay, when they were changing the reward structure from a plain salary to salary plus a performance-related element, we were always asked the question, irrespective of which bargaining unit I was dealing with, of how did they define performance-related pay? What did an individual have to do to get that additional payment? And as 26 years as a lay and then full-time officer of a trade union, I never ever got a straight answer to that question. Because the job is a job. You're paid a salary to do the job. So in response to that question that I asked, I was given the following platitudes. We'll give it to someone who puts an effort above and beyond the norm. We'll reward exceptional performance. But when you try to dig a little deeper about what those words meant, answer came there none. And in truth, we have to remind ourselves that the salary package that people get, like Stephen Hester at RBS, is pretty significant in its first place. So in order for me to achieve even more, then the definition has to come in about what is exceptional. And that has to be clearly outlined and has to be transparent. Certainly.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. I'm a little bit puzzled in his argument and that of his own front bench in terms of banker bonus salaries as to whether they're against bankers only or all very high salaries. He's mentioned, for example, Stephen Hester. Just to give an example, Carlos Tevez earns 5 times as much as Stephen Hester. Why doesn't the party opposite? Why doesn't it at least be honest enough to say we want higher taxes instead of just focusing on the bankers?
Well, I think the crucial part that's come through in this debate is that the RBS is owned by the public. And up until last week, until Stephen Hester did the right thing and announced that he wasn't going to accept the bonus, the position was the people on the benches opposite remained silent. Ministers did not say, they said it was up to him. If my memory serves me correctly, if you want to come in and intervene, Minister, I'll be happy to allow you to do so. But Minister said it was up to him. The Prime Minister said it was up to Stephen Hester. And in relation to Carlos Tevez, I'm not a Man City fan, so I'm going to leave that particular issue alone. I have enough problems, Mr Speaker, with Glasgow Celtic Football Club, never mind worrying about Manchester City.
The member is very generous, and I would just make the point to him that the distinction he seems to make is between state-owned entities and non-state-owned entities. Is he therefore saying that if Hester worked for a non-state-owned entity, he'd be quite happy with his bonus package? That seems to be the implication of his answer to me.
Well, I think there has to be a responsibility across every business, whether it be private or public. I'm not a communist. You would be delighted to know. There will be people. I don't suggest that we move to a Cuban model, who are all paid the same for doing different jobs. I recognise that people have got different contributions to make, and they should be paid different salaries for doing so. But offering examples that go to the extreme, like Premiership footballers, and then to other systems within the country in which we work, other systems of capitalism, I don't think it takes the debate much further forward. The analogy I draw between the civil service and the Royal Bank of Scotland is that the civil service is the public sector, as is the Royal Bank of Scotland, because we own the largest share in it. And the difficulty that we had defining performance-related pay in the civil service strikes me reads across to the difficulty we have in defining performance-related pay with the Royal Bank of Scotland. Because, Mr Speaker, no, I think I've been generous enough in giving way, and as other members want to come in and make a contribution. But, Mr Speaker, in terms of bankers' bonuses, it appears that even when we have behaviour being rewarded which is non-productive, because the Royal Bank of Scotland and other banks haven't met their Mellon targets, and in each of 11 of the last 12 months they haven't met their targets for lending to SMEs. When bonuses are being awarded in those circumstances, surely it is a case of the Emperor's new clothes. Bankers' bonuses must be based on cannot be based on an opaque set of rules, and they are a travesty, a charade, and the practice should be outlawed not only in RBS but in other organisations which can't properly define a performance-related pay system. The era of these bankers' bonuses, which are unacceptable, must come to an end. We need a direct relationship between reward and performance, but most importantly, in terms of the Royal Bank of Scotland, it has an economic duty to lend to small and medium-sized enterprises to ensure that the economy of our country starts to improve. And on that note, Mr Speaker, I would commend the motion and I will be supporting it.